Stan Gibelisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1, GV Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. When I was about 10 years old, maybe 9 years old, in the early 1960s, I remember getting a little shortwave and experimental radio kit that comprised a pegboard with little pins you could stick in it and little clip leads and various resistors, capacitors, and a 1T4 vacuum tube, a 45 volt battery for the plate power supply, and a 1.5 volt cell, flashlight cell for the filament of the tube. And you could build various circuits, including a regular broadcast AM receiver. You could actually make a little transmitter. It had a little earphone type thing that you could use as the microphone for an AM transmitter and actually listen to yourself on a nearby AM radio. And by nearby, I mean maybe 100 feet away or so. And it also had a shortwave radio receiver circuit. That was one of the most advanced in the circuits that it had. And I remember hearing my first shortwave signals on that thing. It only received in the AM mode. It had no beat frequency oscillator, BFO. But a little later I got a Hallicrafter's SX130, Sierra X-Ray 130 shortwave receiver, and set that up down in the fallout shelter of our house, which I called the lab, and ran a long wire out around the sort of meandering hall that led into that fallout shelter. You know, that was just after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we were all terrified that we were going to get attacked by nuclear bombs from Cuba. And we were very concerned that there was, and we read all about radioactive fallout and how to build a shelter and the various food supplies you had to have. We did, in fact, have that place stocked with food, but I used it as the lab. We painted the walls a sort of a tan color and tiled the floor and made it into a fairly decent little room for my experimentations. And I heard all kinds of shortwave radio broadcasts on that receiver. I remember being astonished when I first tuned into WWV, the National Bureau of Standards time and frequency station, on 10 megahertz, and heard that strange pulsing tone, and heard all kinds of foreign language broadcasts, and was also able to receive ham radio operator signals, because the radio had a BFO in it, which allowed for CW and single sideband reception, and thinking, you know, I'd kind of like to be a radio ham. And of course, eventually I did get my ham radio license, my novice class license, when I was in 12th grade, March 1966. My dad drove over to Waseca, Minnesota, and bought me an E.F. Johnson Viking Adventurer transmitter, crystal controlled. I've described that in a different video. And I was on the air. My Elmer W0GLE Golf Lima Echo Bill, who is a silent key now for quite some time, taught me how to build a dipole antenna as opposed to just the wire that snaked out of the fallout shelter into the great outdoors. A resonant dipole antenna, 66 feet long, fed in the center with RG8U coaxial cable. And I was a radio ham, and have been ever since. Have been an ARRL member for that length of time as well, over 50 years. Now, I am of the age where I could be somebody's Elmer, and I hope maybe by doing these YouTube videos, I can serve as your Elmer, or the Elmer for lots of people who might want to be radio hams. It's a great way to have fun, I'll tell you that. And so much more you can do these days than you could back in the old pre or post World War II days of nuclear bomb threats and all kinds of things like that. Stan Jabalisco, W1GV, saying 73, and so long, which, since the very beginning of my ham radio career, has always translated into da-da-da-da-da-da, so long.